The Adventure of the Disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax. Very well, but why Turkish? Holmes asked, fixing his keen eyes upon my boots. I had been leaning back in a wicker chair, my legs stretched out before me, and it seemed those sharp, ferret-like eyes of his had missed nothing. English make, I replied, somewhat puzzled. Bought them from Latimer's on Oxford Street. Holmes gave a thin, patient smile. Who is speaking of your boots? I refer to the bath. Why, when you might bathe in comfort at home, did you pay good money to attend a Turkish bath? I've been troubled with rheumatic pains of late, said I. I suppose I'm growing old. The Turkish bath falls under what we call alternative therapies, restorative cleansing to the system. In any case, I added, for a rational man to infer from my boots that I have visited a Turkish bath is quite extraordinary. I should be much obliged if you would explain how you arrived at it. The chain of reasoning is simplicity itself, my dear Watson, Holmes answered with a mischievous glint in his eye. Were I to ask who sat beside you in the cab this morning, I should employ precisely the same method in explaining it. I felt faintly nettled. Offering a fresh example is not the same as providing an explanation, I protested. Bravo, Watson. A most reasonable and entirely respectable objection. Let us begin at the end, the cab. You must have noticed the splash of mud upon the left shoulder of your coat. Had you occupied the center seat, no such stain would have occurred. And had mud been thrown up, it would have marked both sides equally. From that, I deduced your position, and consequently, that another passenger shared the seat. Remarkably plain, now that you state it. As ordinary as breathing, he replied lightly, and the matter of the boots and the bath. Child's play. I know your habitual method of tying your laces. This morning they are secured in an unusually elaborate double bow, clearly not your own handiwork. Therefore, someone tied them for you. Who might that be? A cobbler? Or an attendant at a bath? I dismiss the cobbler, since your boots are nearly new. What remains? The Turkish bath. Absurdly simple, and yet beneficial in its results, I trust. In what way? You spoke of seeking change of the baths. Allow me to offer you another variety. What say you to Lausanne, Watson? First-class travel. Every comfort provided. Delightful, but to what end? Holmes leaned back and produced his notebook. Among the most dangerous creatures in this world, said he, is the solitary woman adrift from place to place. Harmless in herself, indeed often most estimable, yet capable of awakening the darkest impulses in others. Such women possess sufficient means to wander from country to country, hotel to hotel, yet they vanish in obscure establishments as though swallowed by fog. Lumps in Alwolfstein, and when the wolf strikes, who notices? I fear that some misfortune may have befallen Lady Frances Carfax. The abrupt shift from abstraction to a specific name steadied me. Holmes consulted his notes. Lady Frances is the sole surviving child of the late Earl of Roughton. The estates passed, as you know, to the male line, and little fell to her beyond a collection of antique Spanish silver and several diamonds of unusual cut. She appears inordinately attached to these jewels, refuses to deposit them in a bank, and carries them wherever she travels. Poor lady, still handsome in middle age, though one might liken her to the last weather-beaten vessel of a once splendid fleet. What has happened to her? That, Watson, is precisely the question. Dead or alive? For 4 years, she has written unfailingly every fortnight to her former governess, Miss Daubney, in Camberwell. Yet 5 weeks have passed without a word. Miss Daubney came to me in distress. The last letter was posted from the Hotel National in Lausanne. Since then, Lady Frances has departed, without leaving her forwarding address. The family is anxious and wealthy. No expense will be spared. Is Miss Daubney our only source? Not at all. A lady's bank account often tells more than her letters. Lady Frances Banks was Sylvester's. All her recent checks were cashed in Lausanne, save one, drawn 3 weeks ago and honored at the Credit Lyonnais in Montpellier. £50 payable to Miss Marie Devine. Her maid? Precisely. Why the check was written remains to be seen. I rely upon your investigations to clarify it. Mine. Yours, my dear fellow. The Swiss air will do you good. I am detained here by the mortal terrors of poor old Abrahams. And besides, Scotland Yard grows uneasy when I venture abroad. You shall go alone. Should you desire my counsel at the modest rate of 2d per word, I am but a telegram away. 2 days later, I found myself at the Hotel National in Lausanne. The proprietor, Monsieur Moser, received me courteously. Lady Frances had stayed several weeks and was much liked. Not more than 40, he thought. Still handsome and clearly a beauty in her youth. He knew nothing of the jewels, though the chambermaid spoke of a heavy trunk kept scrupulously locked. Her maid, Marie Devine, had been equally popular and conveniently engaged to one of the hotel's head waiters, a certain Jules Vibart. Her address was easily obtained, 11 Rue de Trajan, Montpellier. So far, I reflected, Holmes himself could have done no more. Yet one mystery remained. Nothing explained Lady Frances's sudden departure. She had seemed content in Lausanne, intending to remain in her lakeside suite for the season. Nevertheless, she left on a day's notice, abandoning a week's prepaid rent. Only Jules Vibart offered a plausible cause. A tall, dark, bearded man had appeared at the hotel shortly before her departure. Un sauvage, un véritable sauvage, et had exclaimed itidly. The man lodged somewhere in the town. He had pressed Lady Frances for an interview along the lakeside promenade. She refused to see him within the hotel. He was English, though his name did not appear in the register. Shortly thereafter, she left. Both Jules and, more emphatically, his fiancée believed this man's arrival connected to her flight. On one point, however, Jules was adamant. He would say nothing of the reason Marie Devine had left her mistress. If I wish to know, I must inquire in Montpellier. Thus ended the first phase of my inquiry. The next task was to trace Lady Frances after Lausanne. That she had taken pains to obscure her destination suggested she sought to evade someone. Wiles consigned her luggage merely to Baden without further direction. Lady Frances and her trunks followed a circuitous route to the Rhine Spa. Once established there, I wired Holmes a summary and received, in return, what I suspected were extravagantly generous compliments. At Baden, the trail was readily resumed. Lady Frances had stayed a fortnight and formed an acquaintance with Dr. Schlesinger, a South American missionary, and his wife. Like many solitary women, she sought solace in religion. The doctor's saintly demeanor, his devotion, and his recent recovery from an illness contracted during his missionary labors deeply impressed her. She devoted herself to assisting Mrs. Schlesinger in nursing the convalescent divine. The hotel manager reported that the doctor spent his days reclining upon a veranda chaise, attendants on either side. He was engaged in drafting a map of the Holy Land, giving special prominence to the kingdom of Midian, upon which he proposed to publish a treatise. At length, his health restored, the Schlesingers returned to London, and Lady Frances accompanied them. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, not a word has been heard of her. Marie, Lady Frances's maid, had left the hotel in tears a few days before her mistress's departure, telling the other servants that she would never return. It was Dr. Schlesinger who settled the entire party's account before they left. One more thing, the hotel manager added as I was preparing to go. You are not the only friend who has inquired after Lady Frances Carfax. About a week ago, another gentleman asked about her. Did he give his name? No, but he was English and a most peculiar specimen. Recalling what I'd learned from Holmes, I ventured, a wild-looking fellow. Precisely so. I could not have described him better. Sunburnt, powerfully built, bearded. The sort who belongs in a country inn rather than a luxury hotel. Rough, dangerous. Not a man one would willingly cross. As the fog began to lift, the outlines of the affair grew clearer. This gentle and devout lady had been relentlessly tracked by that sinister figure. She must have fled Lausanne out of fear of him. Yet he had continued the pursuit and, sooner or later, must have found her. Or had he already done so? Was he the reason for her complete silence? Had her companions failed to shield her from threats or blackmail? What dreadful design lay behind this dogged pursuit? That was the problem before me. I wired Holmes, describing how swiftly and decisively I had struck at the root of the matter. His reply was to request a description of Dr. Schlesinger's left ear. Holmes's sense of humor could be both eccentric and, at times, exasperating. I paid little heed to what seemed a frivolous jest. Indeed, by the time his telegram reached me, I was already in Montpellier, seeking an interview with Marie. I found Lady Carfax's former maid without difficulty. She was devoted to her mistress and had consented to leave only because she believed her to be in safe hands. Moreover, she was soon to be married and would in any case have departed. She confessed, with some embarrassment, that Lady Frances had grown somewhat irritable toward her during their stay in Baden. On one occasion her honesty had even been questioned, an accusation which, though unjust, had made the parting easier than it might otherwise have been. As a wedding gift, Lady Frances had presented her with a check for £50. Marie shared my suspicions regarding the stranger who had precipitated their flight from Lausanne. She had seen him with her own eyes seize her mistress's wrist beside the lake, gripping it like a vice. A terrible, savage man. In her view, Lady Frances had agreed to accompany the Schlesingers to London out of fear of him. Though her mistress had said nothing directly, Marie had perceived a deep anxiety in her manner. At this point, she sprang from her chair, her face taut with alarm. "Look," she cried, "that villain is still following us. There he is." From the open sitting-room window, I saw a dark, broad-shouldered man, his beard like a thorn bush, moving slowly along the street, studying the house numbers. It was plain that he was on Marie's trail. Without hesitation, I hurried out and confronted him. "You are English," I said. He frowned beneath heavy brows. "And what if I am? May I have your name?" "You may not," he snapped. The situation was delicate, but boldness is often the soundest tactic. "Where is Lady Frances Carfax?" I demanded. "What have you done with her? Why do you follow her? Answer me." With a roar of rage, he sprang upon me like a tiger. I have acquitted myself creditably in more than one struggle, but this man was iron-muscled and fought with the savagery of a wild beast. His hands closed upon my throat. My vision dimmed. I was on the verge of unconsciousness when a blow from a stout stick struck his arm. A blue-shirt French laborer, unshaven and broad of chest, had rushed from the tavern opposite to my rescue. Forced to release me, the giant stood quivering with fury, uncertain whether to renew the attack. Then, with a snarl, he turned and strode into the very house from which I had emerged. My rescuer remained at the roadside. As I turned toward him, he said coolly, "You have made a prodigious mess of it, Watson. We had better take the night train to London." An hour later, Sherlock Holmes, in his customary attire, sat opposite me in my hotel room. His sudden appearance at my moment of greatest need was easily explained. The instant he had been free to leave London, he had anticipated my next move and followed. Disguised as a laborer, he had been waiting at the roadside tavern. "I congratulate you, my dear Watson," he said dryly. "A magnificent investigation. You have managed to upset every pot within reach, rouse the entire neighborhood, and discover nothing. You could have done no better," I retorted, somewhat nettled. "On the contrary, I have already done so. Allow me to present Mr. Philip Green, who shares our hotel. With his assistance, we may begin anew." The card on the silver tray was followed by the entrance of the very bearded ruffian who had assaulted me. He stared in astonishment upon seeing me. "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Holmes?" he demanded. "I came at once upon receiving your note. But what has this gentleman to do with the matter?" "Dr. Watson is my old friend and associate. He is assisting me." The man extended a sun-blackened hand in apology. "I trust one did not injure you seriously. When you accused me of harming Lady Frances, I lost control. My nerves are in tatters. But how you knew of me, Mr. Holmes, I cannot imagine. I am in correspondence with Lady Frances's governess, Miss Daubney. Old Susan Daubney in her bonnet. I remember her well. She remembers you also, from long ago, before you went out to South Africa. Ah, then you know everything. I conceal nothing. I swear to you, Mr. Holmes, no man has ever loved a woman as I love Lady Frances Carfax. In my youth, I was a rough, uncultured fellow, such as men of my class often are. She was purity itself, could not endure even the shadow of coarseness. When tales of my behavior reached her ears, she had no words, but she loved me nonetheless. Strange, is it not? Loved me so well that she never married, though all these years have passed. I made my fortune at Barberton. When I learned she was still unmarried, I resolved to find her and try again. I found her in Lausanne and pleaded my case. She softened, but did not accept me. When I returned, she had gone. I followed to Baden and later traced her maid. I am newly come from rough company. When Dr. Watson spoke as he did, I lost my temper. For God's sake, what has become of her? We are endeavoring to discover that, said Holmes gravely. Where are you staying in London, Mr. Green? At the Langham Hotel. Then pray return there and hold yourself in readiness. I will not raise false hopes, but I assure you we shall spare no effort. That is all I can say at present. Keep my card. You may reach me at any hour. And now, Watson, pack your bag. Then wire Mrs. Hudson to prepare, at 7:30 tomorrow morning, a substantial breakfast for 2 hungry travelers. When we reached Baker Street, a telegram awaited us upon the table. Holmes tore it open, read it, and handed it to me with a curious expression. Severed, or torn away, it read. It was from Baden. What does that mean? I asked. Everything, said Holmes. You will recall my apparently irrelevant inquiry concerning the missionary's left ear, an inquiry you neglected to answer. I'd already left Baden. Precisely. I therefore wired the manager of the Englischer Hof myself. That is his reply, and its significance. It proves we are dealing with a most intelligent and dangerous man. Our pious South American missionary, Dr. Schlesinger, is none other than Holy Peter's, one of the most unscrupulous criminals Australia has produced. A remarkable output for so young a country, though that is beside the point. His speciality is the exploitation of solitary women's religious susceptibilities. The so-called wife is an Englishwoman named Fraser. They operate together. I suspected his identity from his methods. The physical confirmation settles it. In 1889, in Adelaide, he was savagely bitten in the ear during a tavern brawl. The ear was partially torn away. Poor Lady Frances has fallen into the hands of the vilest pair imaginable. Anything is possible with them. She may already be dead. If alive, she is almost certainly confined somewhere, prevented from writing to Miss Daubney or to any friend. It is possible, Holmes continued, that Lady Frances never reached London at all, or that, having arrived, she has since been removed elsewhere. I attach little weight to the first supposition. Foreigners rarely evade the meticulous records of the Continental Police, nor do I credit the second. For men of their stamp, there is no better place than London in which to conceal a captive. My instincts assure me she is here. Since we cannot yet determine where, we shall do the only sensible thing left to us. Dine, wait patiently, and this evening I shall confer with my friend Lestrade at Scotland Yard. Yet neither the official police nor Holmes's own quiet but efficient network succeeded in penetrating the mystery. Amid the millions of London, the three persons in question had vanished as though they had never existed. Newspaper notices yielded nothing. Leads were followed and exhausted. Every den into which Schlesinger might conceivably have crept was searched without result. Former associates were watched, but no contact could be established. After a week of fruitless waiting, at last a glimmer of hope appeared. An antique Spanish silver earring had been brought to Bovington's pawnshop in Westminster Road. The man who offered it was a large, clean-shaven fellow with the bearing of a clergyman. His name and address were clearly fictitious. The pawnbroker had not observed his ears, but the description aligned closely with our quarry. Our bearded acquaintance from the Langham had called 3 times for news. On his third visit, scarcely an hour after this new development, his clothes hung loosely upon his powerful frame. Anxiety was consuming him. He implored us repeatedly, "Give me something to do." At last Holmes relented. "They have begun to dispose of the jewels. We may take them now. But does that not suggest the worst for Lady Frances?" Green asked hoarsely. Holmes inclined his head gravely. "If they have kept her confined until now, her release would be their ruin. We must prepare for the gravest outcome. What can I do? Are you known to them?" "No. They may try another pawnbroker next time, in which case we start new. But having secured a good price and encountered no troublesome questions at the first establishment, they are likely to return there when further funds are required. I shall inform the proprietor. He will permit you to wait within the shop. Should the fellow reappear, you will follow him home. You must not reveal yourself, and above all, no violence. I require your word of honor that you will take no action without my knowledge and consent." For 2 days we heard nothing from Philip Green, son, as it happened, of the same-named commander of the Azov fleet during the Crimean campaign. On the evening of the 3rd day, he burst in, pale and trembling from head to foot. "We found them. We found them." Holmes quieted him with a few steady words and seated him. "Tell me exactly what occurred." "He came an hour ago, but this time it was the wife. She brought the matching earring. Tall, pale-faced, sharp-eyed. That will be the woman," said Holmes. "I followed her when she left the shop. She went to Kennington Road and entered a premises there. It was an undertaker's, Mr. Holmes." Holmes started. His voice, though controlled, quivered slightly beneath its icy composure. "Go on." "I went in as well, while she was speaking to the woman behind the counter. I heard her say, 'It is late,' or words to that effect. The shopwoman made excuses, said it would have been ready sooner, but had taken longer than usual, as it was not the ordinary kind. They both fell silent and looked at me, so I asked a trivial question and withdrew. Excellent work. And then she came out. I concealed myself in a doorway. She glanced about suspiciously. Perhaps she recognized me. Then she hailed a cab and drove off. By luck, I secured another and followed. She alighted at 36 Pulteney Square in Brixton. I drove past and dismounted at the corner to watch the house. Did you observe anyone else? All the windows were dark save one on the ground floor, but the curtains were drawn. While I stood debating my next step, a closed carriage drove up. 2 men carried something to the door. It was a coffin, Mr. Holmes. Yes. I nearly rushed them then and there. The woman opened the door. The men bore the coffin inside. She saw me at the corner. I believe she recognized me. I could discern the startled look upon her face before she closed the door. I kept my promise and came straight here. Admirably done, said Holmes, scribbling rapidly upon a sheet of paper. We can accomplish nothing without a warrant. Your best course is to carry this note to the authorities and obtain one. They may hesitate, but the sale of the jewels should suffice. Lestrade will manage the formalities. But what if they kill her before then? What does the coffin mean? If not for Lady Frances, then for whom? We shall act as far as we are able, Mr. Green. Lose no time. Leave this to us. When he had hurried out, Holmes turned to me. It is his task to set the official machinery in motion. Ours is to act unofficially, as we have so often done. The situation is grave enough to justify extreme measures. We go at once to Pulteney Square. As our cab rattled past the Houses of Parliament and over Westminster Bridge, Holmes spoke swiftly. Let us review. These villains succeeded in separating the unfortunate lady from her loyal maid and bringing her to London. Any letters she may have written were intercepted. They hired a furnished house through intermediaries. Once installed, they confined her and secured the jewels for which they had plotted from the first. Their present disposal of the jewels indicates a belief that they are safe, that no one concerns himself with her fate. They know that if she were released, she would denounce them, yet they cannot detain her indefinitely. Thus, the logical conclusion is murder. It seems painfully clear. Now we reason from the opposite end. Begin from two extremes, and the point of convergence approximates the truth. Let us reason not from Lady Frances, but from the coffin. Its arrival suggests, I fear, that she is dead. Moreover, that the necessary burial certificate has been obtained and a lawful interment arranged. Had she been foully slain, would they not have buried her secretly in the garden? Yet all is conducted openly and with apparent legality. What does that imply? That in killing her, they employed some method which would deceive the certifying physician and simulate natural death. Poison, perhaps. Yet unless the doctor is their accomplice, admitting him to her presence seems perilous. Could they have forged the certificate? Too hazardous. No, I think not. Driver, pull up. We have passed the pawnbroker. This must be the undertaker's. Watson, would you oblige? Your manner inspires confidence. Ascertain at what hour the Pulteney Square funeral is scheduled. The woman in the shop informed me without hesitation that the funeral was set for 8 o'clock in the morning. You see, Watson, all in the open. They have contrived the legal formalities and believe themselves secure. There remains only a direct assault upon the enemy. Have you your revolver? My stick will suffice. That will do. Might is right, as the maxim goes. We have no time to await the police or their warrants. Driver, Pulteney Square. As in former days, we shall try our luck together. Upon arriving, Holmes strode to the darkened house and rang the bell with vigor. The door opened at once. The tall woman stood framed in the dim corridor light. What do you want? She demanded sharply. I have come to see Dr. Schlesinger, said Holmes. There is no such person here, she replied, attempting to close the door. Holmes had already set his foot against it. Whatever name he bears, I wish to see the man who resides in this house, he said sternly. After a brief hesitation, she flung the door wide. Very well. Come in. There is no one in this world my husband fears. She led us into a sitting room to the right of the hall. Lighting a gas lamp as she withdrew, she said, Mr. Peters will join you immediately. She had spoken truly. We had scarcely cast a glance about the dingy, bug-ridden house when the door opened and a large, clean-shaven, bald-headed man stepped heavily into the room. He had a broad, florid face with pendulous cheeks. The savage line of his mouth sat ill with the manufactured benevolence of his expression. "There is some mistake, gentlemen," he began, in an oily tone meant to soothe. "You have evidently come to the wrong address. If you consult the lower end of the street—" "There is no mistake," Holmes cut in sharply, "and we have no time to waste. You are Henry Peters of Adelaide. In Baden you were known as the South American Dr. Schlesinger. I am as certain of that as I am that my name is Sherlock Holmes." The man, Peters, now stripped of his alias, started visibly, then regarded his relentless adversary with calculated composure. "I see no reason why that name should alarm me, Mr. Holmes," he said coolly. "A clear conscience fears nothing. What business have you in my house? I wish to know what you have done with Lady Frances Carfax, whom you brought from Baden to this city. If you know where she is, I should be obliged if you would inform me," Peters replied blandly. "She owes me nearly £100, and the trumpery earrings she left in partial settlement are scarcely worth the trouble of pawning. In Baden she attached herself to my wife, and me, yes, under another name, I admit, followed us to London at my expense, and then vanished, leaving her shabby jewels behind. If you discover her whereabouts, Mr. Holmes, I shall be most grateful." "I shall discover her," said Holmes quietly, "and until I do, I shall search this house. Where is your warrant?" Holmes drew my revolver halfway from his pocket. "This will serve until a better one arrives." "What? Are you common burglars?" "You may put it so," Holmes returned cheerfully. "My companion is a dangerous ruffian. Between us, we intend to search your premises." The man turned toward the hall. "Call the police, Annie," he said. We heard the rustle of skirts along the passage, then the outer door open and close. "Our time is short, Watson," Holmes murmured. "If you attempt to hinder us, Peters, you may regret it. Where's the coffin you have just received? What concern is that of yours?" "It is occupied. There's a corpse within." "I must see it." "You shall not." "Then I shall do so without your permission." With a sudden movement, Holmes thrust him aside and strode into the hall. A half-open door stood before us. We entered. It was the dining room. Upon the table, beneath a dim lamp, stood the coffin. Holmes turned up the flame and lifted the lid. At the bottom of the deep coffin lay the emaciated body of an old woman. The light fell upon a shriveled, parchment face. Whatever privation or cruelty might accomplish, it could never reduce the still beautiful Lady Frances Carfax to this skeletal ruin. Holmes's face betrayed both astonishment and immense relief. "Thank God," he muttered. "Another." Peters, who had followed us in, folded his arms. "It seems you have miscalculated this time, Mr. Holmes. Who is the deceased?" "If you must know, my wife's former nurse, Rosa Spencer. We found her in the Brixton Infirmary and brought her here. We summoned DR. Horsam of Furbank Villas. You have his name and address. We cared for her as good Christians. She died on the third day after her arrival. The certificate states senile decay. That is the doctor's opinion, though perhaps you know better, Mr. Holmes. The funeral arrangements were made with Stimson and Company of Kennington Road. The service is at 8 tomorrow morning. Have you found anything in this to accuse me of? You expected to see Lady Frances when you opened that lid, and instead found a poor 90-year-old woman. I would have paid handsomely for a photograph of your face at that moment." Holmes gave no outward sign of resentment, yet the tightening of his fists revealed the blow to his pride. "I shall search the house," he said curtly. Voices and hurried footsteps sounded in the hall. Peters raised his own voice. "Indeed, we shall see. This way, officer. These men forced their way into my house and refused to leave. Kindly remove them." A sergeant and constable stood at the door. Holmes handed over his card. "My name and address. And this is Dr. Watson. Good evening, sir." "We know you well," said the sergeant respectfully. "But without a warrant you cannot remain. I'm aware of that." "Arrest him," shouted Peters. "We know how to deal with this gentleman." The sergeant replied firmly. "You must leave, Mr. Holmes." "Yes, Watson, we must go." Within a minute we were outside. Holmes maintained his customary composure, yet inwardly he seethed. Humiliation did not sit easily upon him. The sergeant followed us. "My apologies, Mr. Holmes, but the law—" "You are perfectly correct. You have done your duty. I presume you have good reason for being here. If there is anything I can do, we are seeking a missing lady whom we believe to be concealed in that house. A warrant is being sought. In that case, I shall keep the place under observation, Mr. Holmes, and inform you of any development." It was barely 9, and our pursuit continued at once. First, we visited the Brixton Infirmary. It was true. A benevolent couple had removed an elderly, senile woman a few days earlier, claiming to be her former employers. The attendant expressed no surprise at her subsequent death. Next, we called upon Dr. Horsham. He had found a woman on the brink of death from old age and had witnessed her passing. The certificate had been duly signed. "I assure you there is nothing irregular," he said. "Not the slightest indication of foul play. Though I did think it curious that persons of such apparent means kept no servants." That was the extent of his testimony. Our final visit was to Scotland Yard. But legal formalities required time. The magistrate's signature could not be obtained until morning. Holmes arranged to return at 9, with Lestrade to press the matter forward. Thus ended our day's exertions. Yet shortly before midnight, the sergeant appeared at Baker Street to report that lights had been seen in the darkened house, though no one had entered or left. There was nothing to do but wait. Holmes was too agitated to converse and too restless to sleep. I left him frowning beneath his heavy black brows, pipe in hand. Whenever some fresh idea stirred within him, his long, nervous fingers tapped upon the table. Several times in the night, I heard him pacing the house. At last, at dawn, he burst into my room, pale and hollow-eyed, still in his dressing gown. "The funeral, what hour was it?" "8, was it not?" "It is now 20 minutes past 7. Good heavens, I have been a fool. Quick, Watson, quick. It is a matter of life and death. We have one chance in 100. If we are too late, I shall never forgive myself. Never." Within 5 minutes, we were racing from Baker Street in a cab. Yet when we reached Big Ben, the clock showed 25 minutes to 8. As we turned into Brixton Road, the hour struck. But we were not the only ones delayed. Though 10 minutes past the appointed time, the hearse still waited before the house. Indeed, as our foam-flecked horse drew up, we managed to block the path of 3 men who were just emerging with the coffin. Holmes sprang from the cab and barred their way, pressing his hand against the chest of the foremost bearer. "Back inside at once," he cried. At the rear of the coffin stood Peters, his great face flushed crimson with fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted. "What do you want now? And where is your warrant?" "The warrant is on its way," Holmes replied coldly. "Until it arrives, that coffin remains in the house." Holmes's commanding tone had its effect upon the bearers. As Peters darted back into the house and vanished from sight, the men obeyed. The coffin was set once more upon the dining table. "Quick, Watson, quick!" Holmes cried. "There's a screwdriver here, another for you. If that lid is off within the minute, you shall each have a sovereign. No questions. Set to work. That's it. One more. Another. Loosen the rest. It's giving, yes, there." Together we wrenched the lid free. As it came away, a stupefying reek of chloroform struck our faces. The head of the figure within was swathed in cloths soaked through with the drug. Holmes tore them aside and looked down upon the statue-like, expressionless face of a middle-aged, gentle, and beautiful woman. He slipped an arm beneath her shoulders and raised her into a sitting posture. "Gone, Watson? Is there no hope? It is not too late. Tell me it is not too late." For half an hour it seemed indeed too late, whether from suffocation or the heavy vapors of chloroform. Lady Frances appeared to have crossed that narrow frontier which divides life from death. Yet artificial respiration, a hypodermic of ether, and all the resources at our disposal gradually kindled a spark. A tremor of the eyelids, a faint mist upon the mirror. These were the first blessed signs that life was creeping back. The sound of wheels upon the gravel drew Holmes to the window. He lifted the curtain. "Here is Lestrade at last, with a warrant," he said. "The birds, however, have flown. And with him, he added, as firm footsteps echoed in the hall. "There is one who will care for this lady better than we. Good morning, Mr. Green. The sooner we remove Lady Frances from this house, the better. The funeral, meanwhile, may proceed. The poor old woman in the coffin shall go alone to her rest." That evening Holmes spoke with unusual candor. "If you record this case, Watson, it will stand as an admirable example of how even the most rational mind may at times be blinded. To err is human. The wise man is he who recognizes his error and repairs it. I venture to think I did as much. All night I pondered. Something must have escaped me. A phrase ill-turned, an odd detail insufficiently weighed. Once found, the matter would unravel at once. And then, in the gray of dawn, the truth struck me. The key lay in the undertaker's remark reported by Philip Green. The woman had said, "It would have been ready sooner, but it was not the usual kind." They spoke of the coffin. In what way could a coffin be not the usual kind? Clearly, it must have been made to special measure. But why? Why? Then I recalled its unusual depth and the wasted little body lying at the bottom. Why order so large a coffin for so frail a corpse? Obviously to leave room for another. Two bodies interred under a single certificate. Had my faculties not been momentarily clouded, I should have perceived it at once. Lady Frances was to be buried at 8. Our sole chance lay in preventing the coffin from leaving the house. I was by no means certain we should find her alive, but there remained a slender hope, and happily hope prevailed. To my knowledge, these people had not previously committed murder. When driven to the brink, they may have shrunk from the final act. They intended to bury her with no visible cause of death. Even if the grave were later opened, they might yet evade suspicion. That, I believe, was their reasoning. You saw the upper room yourself, that dreadful den in which the poor lady had been confined. They must have flung themselves upon her and rendered her insensible with chloroform. Then they carried her below, placed her in the coffin, and, to ensure she did not recover, poured more chloroform within before screwing down the lid. An ingenious method, Watson, ingenious indeed. A novel contribution to the annals of crime. I confess I have not encountered its like before. Should our former missionary friends slip from Lestrade's grasp, I fancy we shall hear of further enterprises equally distinguished in their future careers.